It's wonderful to see friends from around the world that I haven't seen for a bit, particularly Funda. Yes. And well, anyhow, not to go through all of that. Some people know me as the man with a hat. And as you notice, I don't have a hat on today. So I thought I should fix that. So I brought a few. And part of this, you don't have to answer me, but this one is a really ancient one. It's not the best hat in the world. Actually, I got it in 1989. It was given out in the Grand Tetons in the United States when Gorbachev and Baker signed the accords, which opened well, we know what happened in 1989. Um, so hats go around for a long time. And then I haven't seen Joe Topfer on there, but this is one of my favorite hats. Um, those of you who don't know Joe lives in Berlin. I spent a lot of time in a lot of places I suspect he doesn't want to talk too much about. But anyhow, he showed up here in the States with his hat on, and I said, Joe, you're not leaving the country until I have one. So he was very kind. And then this could be a very painful hat for some people, but do you know where it comes from? It's a real one. Well, I'm not going to tell you. You're just going to have to figure it out. But don't tell me. Um, hats are funny things. Okay, reflections. And shortly, so that if anybody has any questions they want to ask, I'm happy to do that. And Suzanne, your job is to keep me in line. And Karen, and anybody else that cares to. That means if I talk too long or don't talk enough, you're going to tell me what to do. Conversation for 8 billion people. I'm not going through what I went through yesterday, and I don't know how many of you were here for that. And I understand that all of that is available if you care to watch it. But where I started was the hat is itchy. Where I started was with a recognition that I think everybody would agree with. We are in a transformational moment. Whatever it was we thought was going to work isn't working the way we thought it was going to. And there was a time in our world history, not unlike this, back at the end of World War II. And the answer then was to assemble a body of people in San Francisco, out of which came the United Nations, which worked pretty well. But that's changed. And the notion of getting a body of people together to make the plan for the planet is just mind boggling. First of all, there's so many more of us. They're in, we are all in so many different places, mentally, physically, emotionally. Um, I think there's probably one certainty at the moment, at least for me. Anybody who says they have the plan is lying. It's just too complicated. There's too much happening, too many places. Is that an occasion for despair? No, not for me. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to find the ways to enable the people of this planet. I don't know what the count is. I think the number is 8 billion, but whatever. To begin to connect and converse. Now, obviously, we could all do open spaces, but if you do the math on that, The planet will look like Mars by the time we get around to everybody. I mean, it'll just be burned out and done. Is there a different way? Well, I tried to suggest something yesterday. Turn the whole thing on its head. Instead of thinking about bringing open space to people, we certainly do that. We know how to do that. And it's fun. As Thomas said, all of a sudden kids discover that they've been left out. I've never seen a bunch of kids yet in open space who haven't had a marvelous time and been very, very productive. That goes for all sorts of kids, even 85-year-old kids. Excuse me. But we don't have the time to do that. We don't have the venues. We don't have the facilitators. There's got to be a better way. So what I suggested, let's turn this on its head. Instead of the idea of bringing open space to anywhere, start with the notion that's already here. That's what we live in 24 hours a day and always have. Now, it's a fact we do it rather poorly. We keep trying to arrange it. We keep trying to put it in boxes. We keep trying to make people sit in rows. We keep trying to say the plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the actual fact of the matter, I think, it's all open space. So it's not about bringing anything anywhere. It's more about acknowledging what's already here. And if you don't have to bring the open space anywhere, how are you going to get people's attention? What's the invitation? Now, the impossible idea that has just struck me for the last several years is we're an answer society. We keep trying to say, okay, we got to have an answer for this and that and the other thing. We forget the question. Now, there's nothing that draws people together like a really sticky, gooey question, big, deep, without limits. The sort of thing you look at and you say, oh my God. Well, I'll tell you what, we got that, don't we? So instead of looking at the conversation for 8 billion as an impossible, whatever, mad dream, how about looking at it as something that's already started? It's just not going very well. So then the question becomes, how do we help it go better? The notion of sitting 8 billion people in a circle is kind of intriguing, but we don't have to. They do it all the time. We can create a circle in our minds. We can create a circle in the radiance of our personality. We can create a circle every time we're just open with anybody we didn't know before. And if you're wondering how do we need to proceed, well, we do have 5 principles that seem to work out pretty good. So that might just be the order of the day. But then it would be reasonable to ask, what do you do? And there are 2 or 3 things that I think we've learned work out pretty good. First of all, it's called the law of 2 feet. You remember how it goes. If at any time you find yourself in any place where you're neither teaching nor learning, move. Take responsibility for what you care for. Spread your light. Talk to people you never talked to before. Go smell smells you never smelled before. Try a different hat. Wear somebody else's hat. It's an interesting experience. There's something about just sort of walking out the door. You can even see this on a New York subway, which is generally speaking the most unfriendly place I can think of in the world. But it's amazing. If you stand there and actually smile at somebody, if they don't think you're queer, which can happen, they'll smile back. You can actually talk to them. It's a shocking experience. I used to play a game. You can try it sometime if you like. I was the chaplain for Johns Hopkins University. And Johns Hopkins, as you may know, is a very, quote, secular institution. So having a chaplain was kind of funny. And on the Homewood campus, it's a big quadrangle with a crosswalk. And being academic and scholarly, everybody passed everybody and nobody said anything. It was amazing. So what I did as an experiment, I just went out and in the springtime when it got a little warmer, I went out and sat down at the crossing on the ground, just sat there. And amazing things start to happen. People stopped. Some of them wanted to know if I was totally nuts. And I said, well, sort of, but you can do this anywhere, anytime. The conversation begins wherever you open the door and invite people in. And there's never been a time when it isn't edifying. And when you engage in conversations like that, you will guaranteed to meet two critters. We know what they are. They're bumblebees and butterflies. They're the kind of people who, bumblebees, race around the planet, this meeting, that meeting, other meeting, so forth and so on, in and out and up and down and round and about, talking all the time and sharing what they know and confusing the rest of it. But that's all right. If you get 2 seconds with a good buzz and a bumblebee, and you know who they are, there are all those people that annoy the hell out of you because they keep talking or never talk. Or I don't know, the busy ones. And then, of course, we also get some of the folks, the butterflies. You'll find them everywhere. They're sitting on a street corner and they look kind of lost. They're in a city that they don't know. There are people talking a language they never heard of. Now, it may well be that you don't know that language either. It's interesting. In my professional life, the vast majority of the time, I never understood anybody because they're always talking in some language I didn't know. That even includes the Brits. They call it English. I'm not sure. That's all right, Romy. But the interesting thing is, to me, you don't have to understand the words. As a matter of fact, when you can't hear the words, you actually, my experience a lot more. I don't know who was crazy enough to figure it out, and I don't know how they did it, and I don't know if it's accurate. But somebody figured that 95% of all useful communication is nonverbal. Sounds like a good number to me. I don't know. But let's say it's even partially true. I can tell you on the basis of profound, wonderful personal experience sitting in the middle of the African bush with 2 or 3 tribal dialects going all around me and not understanding a thing. I never felt for the moment left out. And the fact that I couldn't understand the words drew me into doing things that I never probably would have done. I was in a celebration one time for the boys' rites of passage, and the chief sent his oldest son down to talk to me. And he said, the chief, this is the chief's message. He said, Harrison, it's time for you to do your dance. Now, what you have to picture is a bush village, really out in the bush. Standard African village, circle, dirt, temperature's about 98, sun's hot. I'm dressed in field boots. I did a lot of photography then. And the one thing I knew the drummers. And I knew the drummers would get me through this. So I just went out in the middle of the circle. I gave John, that was the chief's son, my cameras, and he went off to the side with him, and the drummers started drumming. And drums talk. And I answered. And I suddenly found that what I was doing was a Charleston. A Charleston. For those of you who don't know, this is the white hat, top hat dance of the South. And we did Charlestons in the United States. So anyhow, I did it, and I was actually pretty good with it. But I could only last for about 2 minutes, and the sweat's running off me, and the dust is covering me, and all the rest of it. And if you're really good, some of the women will come out with coins. By that time, you're just one big hunk of dust and sweat, and they'll stick the coins on your forehead, and they'll stick there. Well, I had 2 or 3 coins. And then if you're really good, the chief's first wife, he had 5 wives, she'd come out and she'd do that. She did. And I felt just totally humbled. And I came back off the circle, and I could see the elders down the way, and they were just talking up a storm. And I could hear Pelly, but I couldn't speak it. And so I asked Joseph, I said, go down and ask the elders what they're talking about. He went down and came back. He says, the chief elder wants to ask you where you learned that dance, because that is an old chief's dance. Now, if you know anything about African dance, everybody has their own personalized dance, and it goes from generation to generation. Their chief's dance, Mazo dance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So on that evidence, it's the only thing I've got. I think a Pelly chief, they were heavily slaved, got shipped off to Charleston, did his dance, and it slipped into white society. Small world. So you don't have to talk a lot. Sometimes you just dance. Anyhow, you're going to see bumblebees, butterflies, and the law of 2 feet is really important. You got to move the feet. And then the last thing I think is the admonition we usually say at the end of it: be prepared to be surprised. Everybody, not everybody, well, most people say, I want to get back to normal. That means same old, right? Same old is boring. The truth is, we only see what we're prepared to look at. And you can turn it around. You can only look at what you could actually see, which is why some people remain invisible to us, even though they're there in plain sight. Odd. And all of that starts to change, not just with people, but with everything. If instead of looking for what always was, your antenna is on high alert for what's new and different, and then use that law of 2 feet, move to it. I did my dance. I entered a world I never would have gotten anyway before. We can all do that. And the wonderful thing is that when you do that, the reward is instant and long lasting. I've been on, not only been on, but have good friends on, worked on every continent on the planet. And there are people on the screen today that I met somewhere, sometime, someplace. And there are a lot more people who aren't on the screen that I met and still think of sometime, someplace. That's my family. It's every bit as close to me story. We can have this conversation. It isn't going to be lined up and orderly. It's like Tomas trying to do his music class. Yeah. All of a sudden, everybody's going to say, hey, listen, we're going to do it on our own. Thank you. And it's going to be loud. It's going to be different. It's going to be really weird and quite wonderful. Okay, I've talked long enough. If anybody has any questions, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm going away. And Suzanne, you're in charge, or Karen, or somebody.
It'll be Karen and I, but people can just start the questions, and then if the line gets long, we'll help navigate it together.
And you're looking at a clock. I can't see one.
Harrison, we had a question that popped up yesterday in one of our sessions, driven by your opening remarks yesterday. And I wondered if you could just amplify your statement that we all do open space, but we do it rather poorly. Could you give us just a couple more thoughts about when you say we do it rather poorly, what exactly you mean?
Well, the simple take is we try to plan it. You know, I've been in the corporate world, government world, all kinds of worlds. Everybody has a plan, but to the best of my knowledge, none of them have ever been carried out. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, any plan that did come to completion was irrelevant by the time it got there.
Yeah.
Why? Because the nature of our world is so fast changing, so interconnected, so without boundaries, so new boundaries coming in, that whatever plan we think of is gone. So that's the short take. The world we live in, like all the whole cosmos, is an evolving, interconnected, self-organizing system. And the only time you seriously can screw that up is when you try and plan it. We have all kinds of wonderful examples. The easiest one is what we do to the environment. One of my favorite stories about that is we decided we wanted to make fish more orderly, or get more out of the water. So we built dams on the river, and the fish were unhappy. That would be the salmon. So then we decided to make it better for the salmon. We had fish ladders, which they didn't like to go up. So then we tried to raise the salmon and throw them back in the water. Well, the trouble is, when you raise fish, you feed them from the top, put them back in the ocean. They come up to the surface to eat. They break the surface, and all the seabirds say, dinner. That's not working. But there was another part of all of this. When the fish used to get way up, you know who came down to eat them? Bears. Lots of bears. And then you know what the bears would do? Oh, come on. Does the bear shit in the woods? They did, massively. But if they didn't have any fish, then they didn't do as much as what they used to do. And what's happening now in the Pacific Northwest is the forest dying. Great plan. Make sense?
Planning.
Think we have a question from Rain now? Unless you were not done, Harrison.
Rain, where'd you go?
Good morning, Harrison.
Hey,
How are you?
sitting down.
Me too.
Good.
Well, I wanted to thank you for everything that you just said. It was great validation to me. And I don't know if I ever shared with you, I spontaneously created a thing that I did Saturday mornings. I would just go to my farmer's market and I had this sign, if you can see it.
I can't see, and I don't know how to run this technology. So you
Well,
just gonna have to.
it's a sign. It says creating a world that listens.
Okay.
And it's two red chairs facing each other. And I just
Ah.
sat, I would sit in the farmer's market and just say, have a seat and I'll listen to whatever you have to say. And I listened to people as young as 6 and as old as 94. And I did it for about 4 months until COVID happened and I stopped. And so
You
now,
just ought to take a box of masks with you.
yes. And I thought also I'm gonna take it virtual, but the idea I have is to have artists or an artist create installations that would be set up in public places around the world where people, when they saw it, they would know that this would be a place that they can come and either listen or have someone listen to them. It will be an open space. And so this is just a vision of mine. And I have an idea that because, and you may not receive this, but for me, it lives as truth. My brief moment spending time with you impacted me in such a way that I live my life in open space. And somehow I want that installation to honor you. And I thought of putting your name somewhere on it, or maybe after today, maybe there'll be a hat sitting there somewhere. So that's what I wanted to say. And somehow, however this thing called open space got created, the open space in me has been ignited out of my short moments of meeting with you. So it's been reproduced in me, and that's until I take my last breath.
Well, don't do that too soon.
And you know, I've shared open space with countless people, and it's reproduced by young people around the world. Someone said earlier, the young woman who said, why didn't we teach this in school? Well, there are hundreds of young people who know how to do open space now. So hopefully they've been touched as I have by doing it. So thank you. So that's my question.
That wasn't a question, that was a statement. And I have a statement. You put my name on that thing, I'm coming down to beat it to pieces.
Okay, I'll just put a hat on it then.
You can put a hat on it, that works. I love the idea of two chairs. See, what you need to understand, what was powerful, what created the space was you sitting there. And we tend to go to, let's make this orderly. We're going to have an installation. And I said, no, what we need is a person. Just take a chair. I sat down in the crossroads, or it's amazing what happens. I had an open space one time for 250 rabbis and imams And the subject was world peace, and it wasn't just any old rabbi and imam. I mean, it was the big duties. And two of the people who came were Rabbi Pappenheim, who was the head of the ultra Orthodox in Jerusalem, and there was this young Muslim girl from Jakarta. And the rabbi and I have always shared coffee and solved all the problems in the world. I mean, I do not agree with his politics, but I do like him. And this young girl I never saw before, but anyhow, I introduced her. And this is a great big atrium hotel. Everything was going on around it. And Rabbi Pappenheim grabbed a chair, and he grabbed another chair, and he invited this young lady to sit down. So here is this huge hotel, and this rabbi and this young girl from Jakarta, they sat there and talked for 3 hours. People came all over the place. It wasn't that they were interested in the conversation. It was they connected. And just that connection, you could feel it. It just changed. It changed the qualities of that space. So it doesn't have to be an installation. It starts with you. Anyhow.
I got it.
Sorry. Yeah.
Bring a chair. That's simpler.
They just bring a chair.
Or not, just sit on the ground, you know?
There you go.
There are many, many.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There are many hands up. We don't have that much time, but Sandra Barty, you had your hand up.
Actually, I didn't, but I
Are you
have
there,
a
Sandra?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, she can hear you and she didn't do it.
Yes.
But I do have a question.
All right.
I have a good friend. I don't have to invite her for lunch because I have lunch with her all the time. And she's convinced that there's a world conspiracy and that all the news that she hears are lies and so forth. So there's a basic disagreement about what is reality, what is fact. And it's not that we don't have a personal relationship. It's just that we live in different worlds. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, we all do. I mean, it got to be a new thing. We had our own facts. Well, we've always done that. I mean, if we're honest about it. But the other side of it is, if you want to bring people together, I find the best way to do it is either just sit down in silence or do something together. Now, sometimes that's have a meal, but typically if you have a meal, then you're supposed to talk. And if what you tend to talk about is what you just mentioned, that probably is not going to be productive. But what I always found was when you have a high conflict situation, just invite people into doing something that they all need and want to be doing, which is different than what it is they want to argue about. I'll give you a concrete example. This happened to be an open space, but it could be anything else. There's a township in South Africa called Tembisa, and they were having what they called the taxi wars. And bottom line was the taxi drivers were shooting each other for fares, which was bad for business. And somebody suggested we do a open space to deal with this problem of the taxi wars. And I looked at the folks who suggested it, and I said, you want to do an open space? You want to get all these people sitting in a circle, and you want me to stand in the middle of it? You got to be out of here. And I used an expletive mind. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you an alternative. What we want to do is expand the horizon. So how about doing an open space on economic development for Tembisa? I mean, you got to have transportation, means have to have traffic, taxi cabs, etc. We did. We had 200 or 300 people, Black people, white people, Afrikaners, whatever, and taxi drivers. But all of a sudden, instead of sitting there talking about what they all knew the answers to, I hate you, or whatever, they found themselves engaged in things that they'd just never been there before. And tagline to that story, which I always loved. I got back to Cape Town where I stay in, and phone rings, and God knows what time it was. It was early in the morning. And there's this voice on the other end said, "It works, it works, it works." And I said, "Excuse me, who are you? Where are you? And what works?" Well, it turned out that one of the participants was a petroleum engineer. As it turned out, he's black. And he was also the chairman of the PTA, or we would have called it PTA. And after the Tembisa meeting, he had a PTA meeting. And he said for 2 years, these people just sort of sat there like bumps on logs, did nothing. So I didn't have anything to lose. So I went back and I just rearranged the chairs in a circle and sat down. It was amazing. It's a presence. Create the space. You don't have to plan it. Anyhow.
Thank you so much, Harrison.
I think we've run out of time and you guys need to go to work. I'm sorry I'm not with you, but it's great to see you. And good luck, Godspeed, and don't forget, just find a place and be yourself.
And
Love you.
Harrison, if you happen to be around at the end of the day and you want to join us for closing circle at 2:15, you're warmly embraced and welcome. But if you're napping, that's okay too.
There's a high likelihood that I will be in some other place. And,
Okay.
but I don't know, you never can tell. Take care of yourselves. I'm gone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Harrison.
Much love.
Bye.